Welcome to the virtual international conference, Why the World Should Raise Voice for Uyghurs and Demand China to Stop Persecution. I am Dr. Mojibur Doftori, a trustee of Humanist Association of Finland. The conference is organized by International Human Rights Commission, Geneva, Switzerland, and European Bangladesh Forum, EBF. You can see this program live on Streambrosco and European Bangladesh Forum and British Bangla News. It is available on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Our viewers can send their questions or comments in comment section in Facebook and YouTube Live. Now I will invite speakers of today's program to our audience. Please welcome Mr. Salim Samad, media rights defender from Bangladesh. He is the keynote speaker of today's conference. Please welcome Mr. Salim Samad.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you. You're most welcome. And please welcome Mrs. Rahima Mahmood, World Uyghur Congress, United Kingdom. You are welcome in the program. Next, please welcome Mr. Harry van Bommel, former member of Dutch Parliament, Netherlands.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Then Mrs. Jumreti Arkin, World Uyghur Congress. She's from Germany. You are welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Mr. David Ball, Uyghur Solidarity Campaign UK. You are invited to join in. Is Mr. David, okay, Mr. David Ball will join us later. And then please welcome Mr. Khalilur Rahman, International Human Rights Commission, Switzerland.
Thank you, Mujibur Dr. Another participant also with me, Mr. Nozrul Jamat. So
Yes.
the participants in Geneva.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Nozrul Jamadar. Welcome. And now I will talk about the background of today's subject matter of the conference. Then we will directly go to our speakers. The Xinjiang province is the northwestern region of China, is the home of Turkic-speaking ethnic group Uyghur, who are mostly Muslims. More than 1 million Muslims reported to have been arbitrarily detained in the region. The Chinese government has reportedly imprisoned more than 1 million people since 2017 and subjected those not detained to intense surveillance, religious restrictions, and forced sterilization. There are reports of forced detention of Uyghurs in a systematic way in specially designed camps and torture. Today's virtual meeting will discuss the issues and draw the attention of the world community, including Europe, to protest against the repression of China against the ethnic minority group. We have 6 speakers today of this conference, including Mr. Salim Samad. He is the keynote speaker here. At last, we'll talk Mr. Khalilur Rahman, who will give the vote of thanks as co-organizer of the program at the end of this program. Now, I request Mr. Salim Samad, media rights defender, recipient of Ashoka Fellowship from USA in 1991, and Hellman Hammett Award he received, to present his keynote speech. Mr. Salim Samad, you are welcome here. The floor is yours. Yes, can you hear me, Mr. Salim Samad? You seems to have been stuck. I don't see any movement. So it seems that Salim Samad has some technical issues. We can return to him later in case it continues like this. Now I would request Mrs. Rahima Mahmood, Project Director, World Uyghur Congress UK, to give her speech. The floor is yours. Yes, please.
Thank you for your excellent introduction, and it is a privilege and honor to speak at this timely event. My sincere gratitude to the organizers of the European Bangladeshi Forum.
Yes.
My name is Rahima Mahmood. I was born in the city of Gulja in the north of the Uyghur region. The Chinese call the region Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, but we Uyghurs prefer to call it East Turkestan. I was brought up in a large religious family. The discrimination and persecution of the Uyghur people has long history. From my childhood until I left my homeland in 2000. As a Uyghur, I experienced frequent discrimination and witnessed brutal crackdown on any moderate dissenting voices. The event which led me to leave my beloved homeland was the February the 5th Gulja massacre in 1997, a peaceful protest mainly demanding religious and cultural freedom, followed by a crackdown that targeted mainly young religious clerics for 3 months. As usual, the military were deployed, and on the day, we believe that over 100 were killed, followed by mass arrest. I have been unable to return home because of my activism against the Chinese government in support of my people. The last time I spoke to my brother was in January 2017. He told me in a trembling voice, "Please leave us in the hands of God, and we will also leave you in God's hand." My work as an interpreter and translator bring me into contact with first-hand accounts of suffering in the notorious 21st century concentration camps, as well as the heart-wrenching tales of mothers and fathers who have lost their children, young and old. Every Uyghur family has a similar story, each more horrifying than the other, of the effects of the brutal ethnic cleansing and genocide that have taken place since 2017, while the world closes its eyes to the suffering. The most painful part of the job is not being able to offer words of comfort and hope in the midst of the torment. I worked as a consultant and translator for the documentary Undercover China's Digital Gulag by Robin Bonwell, which won BAFTA on current affairs and featured former camp detainees and material gained through an undercover operative. I was horrified when a Chinese official was asked whether he felt Uyghurs' human rights were being violated. And he responded by saying, "They don't have human rights. It's not about violation. They just don't have human rights." There was another government official told the undercover filmmaker, "Most of the detainees are becoming insane. We need to build a lot of mental hospitals." A Uyghur IT expert who worked for a state-controlled high-tech surveillance company stated that everyone was fearful, whether those already taken inside or those who are waiting to be taken in. Our relatives, under the influence of the state terror, dare not even greet one another openly without fear. It is unbearable to describe the life there. A knock on the door from anyone would bring extreme anxiety and fright. The goal of this government is to detain as many people as possible. The computerized system is designed to criminalize innocent people. He also stated that facial recognition system specifically target the Uyghurs with high nose, hairy eyebrows, and eyelashes, beard, the typical Uyghur facial figure, and led the system with great importance. The distinguished facial structure of the Uyghurs was installed in the proportional data bank, are being analyzed exclusively. By detaining people and creating an atmosphere of fear, they increased the level of fear in the Uyghur people to the maximum. No one dares to show any resistance, cannot express their dissatisfaction at any events or meeting, including conversation with friends. They cannot even openly share the experience of being treated unfairly or of their mistreatment. From the accounts given by the camp survivors who have been released due to them being foreign nationals, the life inside the camps was one of horror, where detainees suffer from brainwashing, indoctrination, torture, lack of food, overcrowding, sleep deprivation, rape, forced sterilization, and forced labor. As for me, being a Uyghur, my heart aches as it feels the sorrow and pain when thinking of the horror that my people are enduring, and not knowing what has happened to my dearest sisters, brothers, and all my relatives. The plight of my people has all the hallmarks of genocide. The World Uyghur Congress has commissioned a new independent people's tribunal chaired by the British barrister Sir Geoffrey Nice QC, who was prosecuted at the trial of Slobodan Milosevic in The Hague. He led an inquiry last year that revealed China's barbaric practice of forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China. To investigate the atrocity against Uyghur people and assess what it means in international law. All governments, especially the UK and EU, should stand ready to engage with the judgment of the tribunal when it comes. Since September last year, after I became the UK project director for the World Uyghur Congress, I, along with some very top human rights activists and advisors, set up a cross-party, cross-community Stop Uyghur Genocide campaign. And I would really hope more people can join this campaign. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mrs. Rahima Mahmood, for your moving speech. Now, Mr. Salim Samad seems not to be there, our keynote speaker. We can move to Mr. Harry van Bommel. Now I request Mr. Bommel, the member of Dutch Parliament from Socialist Party. He is a globalization activist and former educator, to give his speech. Mr. Bommel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Please nod if you do. Thank you very much for inviting me to your conference. I think it is very important that European-wide, even internationally wide, we work together to improve the fate of Uyghurs, and not just in East Turkestan, but also in our own areas, because we know that in the Netherlands, Uyghurs feel threatened, and they cannot trust people they meet. Sometimes they are under threat that people from the Chinese embassy are following their steps and watch whatever they do closely. An international campaign to stop the genocide in East Turkestan is welcomed very much, but I think that a full support internationally can only be organized if people feel free to speak out in the respective countries. That goes for the Netherlands, where freedom of speech is valued very highly, but also for other countries in the European Union and worldwide, because of the threat there is exercised by China through their long arms, their embassies, and their people. Sometimes even in the Uyghur community, people are considered to be spying for the Chinese embassy. We don't see the face of the speaker. Is that a comment?
Yes,
I have my camera on.
Okay. I can see you here, but let's see. You please continue. The technical person will try to solve it. I hear you at least.
Okay.
Do the others hear him?
Can all of you hear me?
Yes, we can see and hear him.
Oh, you can see me.
Okay, please continue. Yeah.
Okay. In my period as a member of Dutch Parliament, I have been a member of the Dutch Parliament for almost 19 years. I retired 3 years ago. I was a spokesperson on foreign affairs during the entire period I was in Parliament, and I had the privilege to invite the former president of the World Uyghur Congress, Mrs. Rabia Kadir, to the Dutch Parliament. And working together with the Uyghur community in the Netherlands, we are now trying to get meetings with the present president of the World Uyghur Congress, Dolkun Issa. I think it is very important that there is a platform for the World Uyghur Congress, for Uyghurs in general, a platform both in the media and also in parliamentary politics. To improve the chances that this is successful, together with a few Uyghurs in the Netherlands, we launched a Facebook page for the Uyghur Support Group Netherlands. We established individual contacts with members of parliament. In the Netherlands, it is the case that some spokespersons on foreign affairs are interested intrinsically in the case of Uyghurs, individual cases when it comes to asylum, but also in human rights in East Turkestan. These MPs can host meetings in the Dutch Parliament. And I'm sure that it is quite the same in other countries in Europe. So the relation to national parliaments is of extreme importance. You only need 1 or 2 MPs who are sympathetic to the cause of Uyghurs, and you have a foot between the door in your national parliament. National parliaments can be petitioned. We are organizing a petition right now to condemn the fact that certain chains of shops selling clothes use forced labor from Uyghurs. We have identified certain chains of shops, certain branches, certain brands, I should say, and we are now bringing this information to the Dutch Parliament so that the Dutch Parliament can start an investigation and come to a general political opinion about these facts. Already mentioned by the previous speaker is the organ harvesting of prisoners. This should be investigated internationally. This is such an important issue and so hard to investigate nationally. This has to be done internationally. It has to be done by respected human rights organizations. The press can play an important role, and therefore we are also trying to develop a press strategy to make sure that the Dutch press is first of all informed about what's going on in East Turkestan. As you know, the American elections and COVID-19 are on front pages of national newspapers every day, but the situation in East Turkestan and the fact that that more than 1 million people are detained in camps, sometimes only reaches page 16 of a national newspaper. So we have a lot to do. First of all, to inform the press, to get testimonials in the press, and to make sure that people who are personal witnesses to these circumstances find their way to the press. The World Uyghur Congress and national organizations for human rights can play an important role in this. In the Netherlands, we find Amnesty International interested in the cases of Uyghurs. So Amnesty International is a well-known and well-respected human rights organization. So we are working together to get Uyghurs and their testimonials brought to the press and brought to Dutch Parliament. I think it would be wise for the World Uyghur Congress to bring together a platform of former parliamentarians, sitting parliamentarians, so that we can work together and make sure that when there is a new parliament, we will have elections in March next year, and maybe half of the members of parliament will be renewed, and to make sure that there is continuity in the work of the Uyghur community, of the World Uyghur Congress, and of activists working together with the Uyghurs, so that we can make sure that we do not have to start all over again informing Parliament and making sure that spokespersons are known. I hope that we can work together so that there is a platform and continuity is guaranteed in the benefit of the Uyghur community at home in the Netherlands, but of course, most of all, in the benefit of the Uyghurs in East Turkestan. Saying that I hope that we can work together European-wide to make sure that activists, members of parliament, former members of parliament, and of course human rights organizations can work together with the World Uyghur Congress to make sure that all the work that we deliver is effective and successful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I thank Mr. Harry van Bommel for his valuable speech. Now I would go to Mr. Salim Samad. He's the media rights defender from Bangladesh and recipient of Ashoka Fellowship, USA, 1991, and Helman Hamad Award. To present his keynote speech, Mr. Salim Samad, the floor is yours. I don't hear your sound. Can you unmute your mic? Thank you. Please, Mr. Salim Samad will return to you after a while, and we'll continue with other speakers. So now I request Mrs. Jumratai Arkin, the Program and Advocacy Manager of World Uyghur Congress, Munich, Germany, to give her speech. Mrs. Jumratai Arkin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this event, which is, like my colleague has said, a timely event in the crisis of today. I think I would just like to highlight all of the, human rights violations that are unfolding in the region in the last 3 to 4 years. And I think just to start with, I would just highlight the fact that these human rights violations or atrocities did not start overnight, did not happen overnight. It was a slow escalation over decades, I think, and it all started when our territory or land was colonized by the Chinese Liberation Army, the Chinese government, and it was then annexed to China, and it became the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in 1949. So a couple of policies such as the intensive mass migration of Han into the region, into our land, was started in the 80s. And some other policies like the bilingual education policies, which then introduced education for children in Han, and majority language, which is Mandarin Chinese, that then diluted the use or the importance of Uyghur language, which is a basic fundamental right. And so, of course, after a couple of years, it then escalated, and we've seen the horrible crimes that are unfolding in the region in the past 3 years, with the, of course, mass arbitrary imprisonment of Uyghurs and other Turkic ethnic groups since 2017, who are now estimated between 1.8 to 3 million of people. And these people are detained there arbitrarily in the camps without charge, indefinitely, without legal representation, and they're forced to undergo political re-education. The reporting on the camp system was corroborated by recent official CCP documents leak, the China cables, the Karakash list, which provided us a better picture of the system of internment camps and the reason behind the existence of these camps. And the conditions were told by former camp survivors who managed to leave because they either held other passports. Most of them had Kazakh passports, or were married to another individual from another background. And the detainees told us that they were held in very poor conditions inside, and the reports also show torture in the camps, and numerous reports also indicated that people have died in the camps, and the World Congress, our president, his mother died in the camp, and his father died under mysterious circumstances as well. And the system as a whole is a system where there is forced assimilation through education, re-education, and all of the other atrocities are happening. And there's some especially acute violence towards women, where they have faced rape, torture, and some other ill treatment or degrading treatment as well. There's, I think, another really important thing to note is that the repression doesn't just revolve around the camps or the camp system. It is beyond the camps. It actually affects the whole society. In East Turkestan, no Uyghur or other Turkic ethnic group can leave freely. They're living in an open air prison. Even though they're not sent in a camp, even though if they're allowed to continue their so-called normal life, they're under constant surveillance. All of their movements are under scrutiny, and this started with the appointment of Kim Chang-go as state secretary in 2016, and he has transformed the region into an open-air prison. Actually, Human Rights Watch did an excellent reporting on this issue, where they have reported the use of an app called the iJob app, Integrated Joint Operation Platform. And this app, they categorize all of the different risk factors that are related to, I would say, being Uyghur. So if you had a longer beard or a woman wearing veils, these were all extremism, I would say, extremism factors. And with all of the different data that the government possesses on Uyghurs, they are all stored in the same place, and they have all this data in hand. And if you look at the physical surveillance status, the urban areas are divided into grid with increased police presence and surveillance. Each zone is equipped with a dense network of security cameras, checkpoints, and convenient police stations. DNA samples, fingerprints, iris scans, blood types of all residents in the region between the ages of 12 and 65 were collected from 18.8 million people in East Turkestan in 2017. So this is the life outside of the camps. And then if you look at other areas of violations of basic rights, you would have to look at also to the cultural rights, which are widespread destruction of physical cultural sites and other sites of cultural and religious importance, such as destruction of thousands of mosques, destructions of graveyards, cemeteries, of sacred shrines. All of the basic and sacred places to the Uyghur people are being under attack. And there's also, with all of the ongoing atrocities, adds another layer, which is the family separation policies, with sometimes both parents being held into these camps. The children are left without any parents, and they're sent to state-run orphanages where these kids also have to go undergo political re-education, abandon their languages, culture, history, everything that makes them unique and makes everything that ties back to their culture is being basically not taught or under attack. And so they have to also learn Mandarin Chinese in these state-run orphanages and so on, and on top of being separated from their parents. There is also the introduction, I think, the introduction of restrictive legislation targeting religious practice for Uyghurs, such as the regulations on religious affairs, counterterrorism law, which led to a wide international condemnation. The Chinese government introduced these legislations to really legalize, in a way, all of their practices that were against, of course, international law, but also Chinese law, because in the Chinese constitution, the Uyghur people are granted fundamental freedoms, such as freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. All of these things are under guarantee in the constitution, but they have introduced other legislations to withdraw these freedoms from Uyghurs. And I think in the last year, just this last year, we have seen an escalation of other violations that adds another layer to the ongoing crimes against humanity, and that is the forced labor angle. So we know that in March, Australian Strategic Policy Institute released a report on the use of widespread use of forced labor across China, where the Chinese government had an active campaign to submit Uyghur workers under forced labor conditions. And there's been also thousands of transfers into other regions of Uyghurs to work in factories where they're working under forced labor conditions. And this is the global aspect of this issue, is that the forced labor of Uyghur people have now been tainted global supply chains. So all the international brands that we know, such as Nike, Adidas, Zara, H&M, all these brands that we know have been involved directly or indirectly as using Uyghur forced labor. And I believe the last kind of escalation was when we learned about the government's active campaign to forcibly sterilize Uyghur women in an attempt to control the birth in the Uyghur region, the birth rates, which then led to a decrease of Uyghur births in the region, which actually meets the definition of genocide under the UN Convention. So all these violations taken together now constitutes a genocide, and my colleague Rahima also said it. We've now launched an Uyghur tribunal, People's Tribunal, to investigate all of these crimes. But it is one thing to do such an investigation, but it's also another thing to take meaningful actions, concrete actions immediately. And I think I also want to just highlight the fact that, and kind of reiterate in a sense what Harry already said, was that this is not only impacting Uyghurs in East Turkestan, but it's impacting us in the diaspora community, where I think we often forget about these. So about me, about Raima, we all live under such anxiety and stress because of our, relatives, but also the additional harassment that we receive or that we're subjected to by the Chinese authorities because of their long arm that can reach us in many different forms and ways. And I think we must focus on that as well, because we are free to speak, but we also have to have the right environment to do so, have to feel safe to do so. And many prominent activists have faced these reprisals in the most severe ways. I will just maybe talk about Dolphin Isa's case, where he was followed in the UN by Chinese diplomats to, in a way, to intimidate him. And he was also kicked out of the UN facilities, the UN buildings, for attending different events because of the Chinese pressure, because of the Chinese political influence. So we must be aware of this harassment that the Uyghur diaspora continues to face, and how the Chinese government uses our relatives back home as reprisals, and we call this a diplomatic hostage. So I think it's important to realize that, because it's not something that's happening in such a far away region. It's also happening in these respective countries, such as the Netherlands, Germany, all these countries, Western countries that are so proud of their free society and democratic values. But when it comes to protecting marginalized groups or groups that are affected by these crimes or violations, they're a bit more shy to speak out, because it's China they're addressing against. And so I think we must be aware of this and continue to work hand in hand to resolve this issue as fast as possible, because behind all the statistics and numbers, there are real people suffering. And Raima and I were just two of these people that counts in millions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jurma Zumrati Arkin, for your nice presentation. Now we have got back Mr. Salim Samad. Mr. Salim Samad, can you hear me? Mr. Salim Samad, can you hear me? Hello. It seems that it is stuck now, so we will go back now to Rahima Mahmood. You had certain aspect left, so if you could continue from where you finished. You couldn't complete the speech. If you can continue from the last.
I have completed my speech.
Yes.
I don't think I have left anything out.
Okay.
Unless there is questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, you can give a general situation analysis again. It's my question that what is the situation now in Uyghur land?
So okay. Well, what is happening in my country? My colleague Zumrat has, I think, give you very detailed information about internment camps, about the children being separated, about the destruction of the cultural sites and the holy sites, and about the forcible sterilization, birth control, torture, rape, also, as well as the people who are living in exile are being harassed, not free to carry out the campaign work. Also, the family held hostage, or sometimes the parents of the activists, the Chinese government used them or their siblings or any extended family members, and trying to pressurize the people to stop the campaign work. Or so the situation is extremely difficult. Like I said in my speech earlier, for the last 4 years, I was unable to contact anyone, and I'm not just the only person. There, 90% of the Uyghur people living in exile lost contact, forcibly cut out, from families. And that is itself is extremely difficult. Just imagine when you have everyone have a family back home, and you don't know what happened to them, knowing that what is happening in the region, internment camps, the concentration camps, 3 million at least, 3 million, even maybe more, Uyghurs are interned in these camps. And over 500,000 secretly transported to mainland China in prisons. I'm sure people have seen the drone footage of the Uyghurs blindfolded, shackled, and shaved, clean shaved, and waiting outside the train station. And all this image can give you very clear picture of what is happening. I don't think that anyone now should excuse to say, I don't know. I will ask people to Google Uyghur, Google Chinese concentration camps. Then you will find many reports, videos, documentaries that can reveal what is happening in my country. So the most important part is, what can you do? What can you do to help Uyghurs? So if you ask me what can you do, number one thing, I would ask you to learn about the situation and also educate people around you, raise awareness about what is happening. And second thing is contact your MPs, your local politicians, and write to them, ask them to take actions. Thirdly, you can join the campaign, the Stop Uyghur Genocide campaign, sign petitions, and any activities, if you can join protests or whatever you can do to support these actions. At the same time, also mindful about the products, what you buy. My colleague earlier has already mentioned about the forced labor. Over 80 famous brands have, from the ASPI report, that listed that over 80 brands have been tainted by this Uyghur forced labor. Therefore, you need to be mindful about not buying the products that is made by Uyghur forced labor. And also, I would call on people to join the campaign to stop 2022 Winter Olympics.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Rahima Mahmood, for your valuable situation analysis in Xinjiang. Welcome to the virtual international conference, Why the World Should Raise Voice for Uyghurs and Demand China to Stop Persecution. I am Dr. Mujibur Daftori, a trustee of Humanist Association of Finland. And this program is arranged by International Human Rights Commission, Geneva, Switzerland, and European Bangladesh Forum. You can see this program live on stream, live in British Bangla News, and European Bangladesh Forum Live. And before it was streamed in Stream Brosco, we had some technical difficulties, so we shifted here now. Some of our speakers have spoken there. Now we'll continue here. Our viewers can send their questions, comments in comment section in Facebook and YouTube Live. Now I will invite speakers of today's program to our audience. Please welcome Mr. Salim Samad, who is present here at this moment. Mr. Salim Samad, most welcome. Mr. Salim Samad is a media rights defender from Bangladesh. He is a keynote speaker of today's conference. Please welcome Mrs. Rahima Mahmood, World Uyghur Congress, United Kingdom. She left us after talking in the previous session. Please, there was Mr. Harry van Bommel, former member of Dutch Parliament, Netherlands. He already talked with us, and Mrs. Zumrati Arkin, World Uyghur Congress, Germany. She talked with us, and Mr. David Ball is here. He's the Uyghur Solidarity Campaign. He belongs to Uyghur Solidarity Campaign UK. So he has now. We are very pleased to welcome him now. And also Mr. Khalilur Rahman, he is from the International Human Rights Commission, Geneva, Switzerland. We are very pleased to invite you all who are here right now. And before we go to the main session, I would like to talk about this background of this conference and on the subject matter. The Xinjiang province is in the northwestern region of China, is home to Turkic-speaking ethnic group Uyghur, who are mostly Muslims. More than 1 million Muslims reported to have been arbitrarily detained in the region. The Chinese government has reportedly imprisoned more than 1 million people since 2017 and subjected those not detained to intense surveillance, religious restrictions, and forced sterilization. There are reports of forced detention of Uyghurs in a systematic way in specially designed camps and torture. Today's virtual meeting will discuss on the issues and draw the attention of the world community, including Europe, to protest against the repression of China against its ethnic minority community. We had 6 speakers of this conference, including Mr. Salim Samad, the keynote speaker. We have him here now. Mr. Khalilur Rahman will give the vote of thanks at last. He's the co-organizer of the program and this program. Now, I request Mr. Salim Samad, media rights defender and recipient of Ashoka Fellowship of USA 1991 and Hellman Hammett Award, to present his keynote speech. Mr. Salim Samad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Please.
Can you hear me? Okay. That's great. That's great. I'm so sorry. I was also, I think the Chinese must have made a lot of problem for all of us, because you understand that the Chinese doesn't want us to listen to. Okay. First of all, very quickly, because I don't want to bore anybody, but of course, China, in fact, commits egregious human rights abuses against Uyghur minorities in Xinjiang, which is northwest province in the fringe of the Central Asia. The Economist magazine very recently attributes the persecution of the Uyghurs is a crime against humanity. It is also the gravest example of worldwide attack on human rights. Since April 2017, Beijing's policy of mass incarceration in the Xinjiang is nearly 1.8 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities have been detained in vast network of intermittent camps inside high barbed wire fences with a floodlight 24/7, guard towers, and electronic device to monitor. For a long time, the Turkic Uyghurs were the majority in 1949 until Eastern Turkestan was re-Christianed and renamed to Xinjiang which is they believe in Chinese means new frontier. Xinjiang was the world's best artificial has Xinjiang right now has the world's best artificial intelligence facial recognition for surveillances of each Uyghur when and where they are meeting at parks or hangouts, when they are leave for work or business, or when they return home. The electronic surveillance has the highest density per square meters than any cities or places anywhere in the world. When the Western media began exposing China of the intermittent camps, or in other words, we call re-education camps, otherwise mass, which is a mass prison in the name of re-education. China is a denial. China is in denial mode and refuses to stand down in herding the Uyghurs into large cages. The international organizations, in collaboration with news organizations, have brought evidence with satellite, digital forensic tools, and narratives of Uyghurs in exile that China has detained nearly 2 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang province, which was originally East Turkestan, as mentioned earlier. East Turkestan, East Turkestan is the home of the Turkic-speaking Uyghurs and other Central Asian peoples like Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Tatars, Uzbeks, and Tajiks. According to Chinese census, the present population of the Muslims is slightly over 11 million. Among the 8.6 million Uyghurs constitute the majority. Today, Uyghur population has been marginalized by the aggressive colonization of the Han Chinese majority in Xinjiang. However, the Uyghur sources indicate that population exceeds 15 million, according to Washington D.C. based International Uyghur Human Rights and Democracy Foundation. A crime which the Uyghurs committed was praying in the mosque or growing long beards like me, which are deemed extremist, lamented The Economist. At least 38 countries joined Germany at the United Nations recently in condemning Chinese human rights abuses in Xinjiang, where the Chinese Communist Party governed authority is engaged in sweeping campaign of the democratic genocide against Uyghur Muslims and other minorities. Cuba initiated a separate joint statement on behalf of 45 countries expressing support for the China's so-called counter-terrorism re-radicalization measures in Xinjiang and opposing the politicization of human rights issues and double standards. China China critics are concentrated in Europe and also include major democracies like Australia, Canada, and Japan, considered free in Freedom House global ratings, while China backers are assorted of not free or partially free countries, including many of the world's most brutal dictatorship like North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Syria. The only Muslim country which has condemned China for atrocities against Uyghurs was Turkey. But I haven't finished. Not to surprise the rights group, the staff of the financial crisis of Turkey made a U-turn after China offered 5 billion to promote bilateral trade and investment as a part of the China's Belt and Road Initiative. The recent publication of leaked documents in New York Times sheds light on the internal mechanics of the crackdown on the Uyghur Muslims. In high drama, last December, the Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. passed a bipartisan bill condemning the gross human rights violations against Uyghurs and calling an end to arbitrary detention, torture, and harassment. In, in 2018, China pivoted denying the camps existing to call them a vocational education and training centers where they were exposed to coerced indoctrination. Months after months, inmates narrated they were drilled to renounce extremism and put their faith in Xinjiang's thought rather than in Quran. The human rights situation in the region has markedly worsened in recent years, according to secret documents of the German Foreign Ministry. Since late 2016, there was an alarming increase in repressive measures and systematic discrimination in China targeting Uyghurs, according to reports by the Chinese media. Thank you for this, for my allowing me to do the presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Salim Samad, for your insightful presentation. We thank you from British Bangla News as well as from European Bangladesh Forum and other International Human Rights Commission Geneva. From our behalf, we thank you. Now I would request Mr. David Ball, organizer Uyghur Solidarity Campaign UK, to give his speech. Mr. David Ball, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to your meeting. I want to, so first of all, and solidarity greetings, of course, to the Uyghur people, to representatives of the Uyghur people who are here in the meeting, and indeed to everyone in the meeting. I think the title of this meeting was why the world should raise its voice in support of the Uyghurs. Firstly, the obvious answer to me is that the Uyghur people, like every people around the world, should be able to enjoy freedom and justice and human rights. This is something that should be available to everyone. And because clearly there is an intense level of oppression and persecution perpetrated against the Uyghur people by the Chinese state. I would say more than this, every nation everywhere has the right not only to human rights and to everyday freedoms, but has the right, if it wishes, to self-determination, to full independence, if that's what it so wishes. And there certainly appears to be very broad, if not overwhelming, support amongst the Uyghur people for that particular demand. At the moment, however, there is the more pressing matter of trying to ease and lift the persecution that we've heard about. Some of that already from the previous speaker, but maybe 1 million or more than 1 million people currently held in concentration camps, the extensive use of forced labor in the supply chains, actually providing products for big Western corporations, companies like Nike, Zara, Apple. This has all been investigated, and these companies and many others are implicated. We know also that there is extensive evidence of Uyghur children being forcibly separated from their families on a mass scale. We know that there is torture and abuse and rape in the concentration camps. We know that Uyghur women are being subject to forced sterilization. And we can see a pattern here of, sorry, on top of that, we know that there is a concerted effort at forced cultural assimilation, which includes a very aggressive indoctrination of people into politically supporting the Chinese Communist Party, and also very heavy-handed prohibition of religious practices and severe restrictions on religious freedom, in particular the religious freedom of Muslim people, who are the majority religious people amongst the Uyghurs. I want to talk a bit about the focus of our campaign in particular.
Yeah.
I've been convening and organizing monthly protests outside the Chinese embassy in London, and we've attempted in those protests and in the other activities we do to try to sort of build a coalition of people from the Uyghur community who obviously have been protesting there for years, many of them. But we're trying to build a broader solidarity, and in particular, we're focusing on solidarity amongst the labour movement, amongst trade union organisations, and in doing so, we do understand, of course, that there is support for the Uyghur cause amongst a broader spectrum, political spectrum, and I'm pleased that there is. We have a focus on the labour movement because we see the trade unions and the labour movement as natural allies of oppressed people everywhere. We remember that. I remember, because I recently saw the speech again, I remember a speech by Martin Luther King where he said, black people in America facing racism, and indeed it's the cause of all people facing racism and oppression and persecution, not least because people who are suffering oppression are very likely also to be suffering conditions of hard labor, of high levels of exploitation, poor working conditions, and so on. It's no now, it's no coincidence, for example, that the Chinese state does not allow the organization of independent trade unions across the whole of mainland China. The one small exception to that is Hong Kong, and even in Hong Kong, as we're seeing, there is an increasing level of oppression and a clampdown on freedoms. And of course, it's a regime that doesn't want to tolerate workers going on strike. Now, this is strange. Now, it's might in the face of it seem to be strange, and brings me to a question about the kind of arguments that activists like me need to have in the labour movement in my country, and I think that it's the same in other countries as well, which is that obviously there are people who look to China as a model of communism. They see it as a place where a revolution was made against the West, against capitalism, and they see it as a hope for a different kind of way of organizing society. The problem, of course, with that is that revolution was never a revolution that brought freedom. Unfortunately, from the point of view of socialism and communism, it was always a lie. And the fact that we have that we see a Chinese state that bans workers going on strike is perhaps one of the most obvious examples of why that has to be a lie. The fact that China executes more people than the rest of the world put together. The fact that there isn't freedom of speech across China and that people are locked up simply for criticizing the government. And there are numerous other examples we can give, but and perhaps in this context, most importantly, the fact that there is no respect for the rights of minority nations, that expressions of national identity, of national assertion are not tolerated, that demands for greater levels of autonomy, let alone full independence, are condemned as totally unacceptable criminal acts. There's this term splitism that's even being that even gets used to describe such things. But nevertheless, one of the tasks, the very important tasks that we have, is to try to confront these kind of politics within our own movement. And I'm sorry to say that there are journals like the Morning Star and organizations calling themselves communist who unfortunately look to China. What I want to tell you is that that isn't You know, that isn't the whole of the left. That isn't the whole of people who are involved in the labor movement, the trade union movement, and the socialist movement. There is huge support for the Uyghur people when people are confronted with the issues, and it's only actually in the last few years that this cause has become better known. Really, in the last year, to be honest. We, for example, have been raising this issue and gaining support amongst trade union branches, particularly in London, where I live. We have support from the national level from our main civil service union here in the UK, the Public and Commercial Services Union. They're supporting our protests and our campaign. A little more than a year ago, we gained support from the Labour Party at its conference. Very clear statement standing proudly in support of the Uyghur people, of their human rights, demanding an end to the persecution by the Chinese government. We've gained support in particular from a number of individual Labour MPs who stood up and made clear statements in support of the Uyghurs, and we will continue to push for that support, to publicise that cause, to gain more support for the Uyghurs. What are we trying to achieve? We want, in particular, the labour movement to use its strength. There's a tradition of workers, trade unionists taking action in support of oppressed people, going right back, for example, to aerospace workers in the 1970s who stopped work on producing jet engines that they knew were going to be sold to Pinochet's Chile to suppress the opposition and the people who had previously supported a democratically elected government, which was overthrown in a coup. More recently, Italian workers went on strike to stop weapons being exported to Saudi Arabia, again, because they wanted to stand for the human rights of the people being oppressed by that regime. We take inspiration from that. We try to organize that. We also seek government action. We want governments in particular to take action on the issue of the forced labor, because that's an issue where governments can do something. They can demand that the companies that are currently doing business with China, they can demand that they fully and thoroughly audit their supply chains and make sure that there isn't slave labor involved. That's particularly at the moment an issue in China, but of course it's something that is of concern in other countries as well. And actually we help the Uyghurs more by saying this is a general concern about forced labor everywhere, but obviously we know that it's a big issue, in particular at the moment in China. So I think that's all. That's what I want to say in summary. But we will continue to organise in solidarity. We will continue to protest. We had monthly protests throughout the time until lockdown. Then we've been having to organise protests in other ways, sometimes through online meetings like this, through tweeting campaigns, emailing campaigns, particularly on the issue of forced labour. And we shall continue to do that. But just to reiterate, thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this event. Well, there's one more thing I want to say. Sorry. So I've outlined the issue, obviously, with the Chinese state. Another reason why we focus on the labour movement is because at the moment there are people who are saying that they are defenders of human rights and opposing the persecution by the Chinese state. Some of those are very For example, right-wing politicians in the USA, even people like Donald Trump, who in other respects are not at all supporters of the rights of Muslims. Donald Trump wanted to ban Muslim people from entering the USA, and in other parts of the world is not standing up for human rights. So these are not reliable. They're not reliable allies, and that's something we need to bear in mind. We need to build strength where we know we have reliable allies, and we need to be able to criticize countries and governments that hypocritically demand human rights in one part of the world and not in another part of the world. That's our focus. That's what we're trying to achieve. I hope, anyway, I hope it's been interesting, and thank you very much again for inviting me. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. David Ball, for your valuable speech. And you focused mostly on campaign work you are doing in the UK regarding Uyghur rights. It's very appreciable. And Mr. David Ball is the organizer of Uyghur Solidarity Campaign UK. Now, I request Mr. Khalilur Rahman Mamoon, President, International Human Rights Commission, Geneva, Switzerland, to give his speech.
Thanks, Mr. Mujibur Dafturi. Have a few moments for me. Good afternoon, everybody, respected speakers and dear participants. On behalf of the organizers, both EVF and International Human Rights Commission in Geneva, Switzerland, I thank you all the speakers and the participants for joining this important virtual meeting on today. The issue is too serious. The Uyghurs are suffering in China, but surprisingly, the world is silent. All Europe is also silent. That is why we felt that we should raise our voice to draw the attention of the world and to draw the attention of the European leaders before it is so too late. Our thanks and gratitude to the distinguished speakers for their valuable ideas and suggestions. We thank especially the leaders of the Uyghurs community in exile, leaders and members of other communities from across the globe. Today, we have participants from different parts of the world, America, North America, Europe, and Asia. We have arranged this meeting in a very short time. That is why there might be some lapses. We apologize for that. Finally, I thank the London-based British Bangla News channel and its CEO, Mr. ATM Munir, for broadcasting this program live on their channel. It is a very popular channel and they have over 100,000 audience. I also thank the Stream Bruce and its CEO, Mr. Sudhir Nannan, for taking care the technical aspects. Thanks to the moderator, Mr. Mujibur Daftari, who is the based in Finland. He is also very popular anchor in British Bangla News channel. I thank EBF management team of their all-out support and to the members of the International Human Rights Commission in Switzerland branch. And so many thanks to Mr. Saiful Islam Dildar, who is the holding International Human Rights Commission International Secretary, and he is the founder of this organization. And finally, once again, thank to all distinguished speakers and participants for your participating and contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khalilur Rahman Mamoon, for your valuable comments. And now we may have Q&A session for about 10 minutes. If we have questions, you may ask questions relevant to the issue at hand, and our valuable speakers, distinguished speakers, will try to answer those questions. Please mention your name while putting any question here. Yeah, I see one question from Poromit Kamar. Everyone participating in the program, all speakers, and Dr. Mujibur Daftari, thank you. A question is, is there a possibility for us as a world citizen to be able to raise our voice? How can we do something about that? I think Mr. Ball can answer this question. Yes, Mr. David Ball. If you could take this question.
How to raise your voice. Thank you. Yes, I think there are a number of ways. I mean, one thing I think we need to do is to publicize the issue as much as we can, and to make clear that people everywhere around the world are standing in solidarity with the Uyghur people. And protesting on behalf of the Uyghur people. The Chinese government has an embassy in most countries around the world. If it's possible to organize protests there, please do. It's very difficult at the moment. It may be difficult in different countries because there may be different laws in terms of what you're allowed to do in certain countries, and also, of course, at the moment with coronavirus lockdowns, things are restricted. But if you can, please get together with other people and organize that. Please also, there are online petitions. There's, for example, if I find the link, I will put it in the chat. But there's an organization called Freedom United, which has organized a call to act as part of the End Uyghur Forced Labor Coalition. Has organized a call to action that is calling on companies, Western companies.
Yeah, it seems we have lost the connection with Mr. David Ball. There is European Bangladesh Forum has written, Yunus Ali Khan said, "Dear all, Assalamu alaikum. I appreciate that doing great work. Regards." Thank you, European Mr. Yunus Ali Khan, for your comment. I hope that our distinguished guest, Mr. David Ball, returns here. Mr. Salim Samad, can you hear me, and can you join us with your video or audio? I think, but anyway, do we have other questions? So we have lost Mr. David Ball. I hope he returns, but let's see. But if okay, no, not many questions. If Mr. David, Mr. David Ball, please continue from where you started.
I apologize. I lost connection there. I do apologize. I don't, these things happen. So there's the End Uyghur Forced Labor Coalition. Please do look them up on the web. Support their activities. They have a call to action, which is really a pledge for Western companies to properly audit their supply chains in China, and make sure that that they're not using Uyghur forced labor. That and this will involve some very difficult, making life very difficult for Chinese government officials, who are generally overseeing and supervising the factory schemes in China, it's an important part of the pressure that needs to be put on the Chinese government, because they need to do business with the West. This is the problem, and I think it's been alluded to before, is that there was, even in the case of Turkey, that initially made critical statements about Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs. The government there wants to do business with China, and in the end, the economic power of the Chinese state means that most governments are silenced. But if we need to put as much grassroots pressure as we can. And I think that needs to come from trade unions. I think to some extent it can come from people who would buy the products of these companies. But if we can put grassroots pressure on them to put pressure on the Chinese government, then we can at least have a chance of trying to ease the level of oppression and persecution The other thing that people may know is that there is the Winter Olympic Games in 2022 are currently scheduled to basically have been awarded to Beijing to organize them, to host them. And there is a campaign called No Rights, No Games, which is calling on the International Olympic Committee, again, not a democratic organization, but calling on them anyway, in so far as we can put pressure on them to say that they need that they must demand of the Chinese government that it respects the human rights of the Uyghur people, and that if it doesn't do that, if it doesn't end the mass internment and all the other human rights abuses, then they will cancel Beijing's hosting of the Winter Olympic Games. So there's a few ways we can stand up. Please do so. Please do what you can. Please look up these projects on the web and on social media. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Salim Samad, are you there? Can you talk? Hello. Okay, seems to be we are not getting the connection. So now we have already talked.
Yes,
before.
I'm here.
We had.
I'm here.
Okay, please continue. Yes.
Okay, just I need to mention this that is missing in the discussion. The Muslim countries, who are supposed to do a major protest, because the Uyghurs, the majority of the Uyghurs, or overwhelming majority of the Uyghurs are Muslims, and they are not allowed to practice their faith. Not a single Muslim country in the world has protested. They have totally sided with China. Of course, and as you all understand, that the most of the Muslim countries doesn't have a democracy. The majority have a repressive regime, and obviously they sided with China. The only Europe and 38 other countries have joined Germany at the United Nations to protest. So that is a very an odd situation. I would say the campaign has to be enlarged, and I believe that we have friends in most of the Muslim countries. We have friends in Pakistan, we have friends in Iraq, we have friends in Syria, in Palestine, and also in Lebanon, and I possibly I mentioned Iran. So we have friends there, so we can definitely get the citizens of the Muslim countries to join this campaign to mention that China has to stop the persecution of the Uyghur Muslims. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Salim Samad, for your comment. And I would like to add here that with Stream Bros company, we are broadcasting it. There are some technical difficulties. Before the difficulty, we has had talked with Rahima Mahmood, Project Director, World Uyghur Congress UK, Mrs. Jumretai Ankin, World Uyghur Congress, and former Dutch Socialist MP, Mr. Harry van Bommel. So they have already talked with us, with our audience. Now, I would like to thank our audience here in British Bangla News. What we see from these overall talks, what we have heard from our distinguished guests, that there is a cultural suppression or cultural genocide by Chinese state on Uyghurs, and there is internment camps in the name of re-education and denying the existence of this ethnic group. So there is vocational and training center. They're putting this kind of things. And allegation of there is allegation that there is Uyghur forced labor, as it came to different from speakers, and which is reminiscence of Gulag Nazi concentration camp. What we see in about the Uyghurs, and no due process followed. While Chinese state is doing this, the due process is not followed, which is a breach of Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which China is a state party. So China has a role. China must play its role to do what it has agreed itself to the international community. Uh, International community, human rights organizations across Europe and elsewhere should press China to stop cultural suppression of Uyghurs. China is the place of the birth of great philosophies. It's a great civilization, and it's also a great power. By being a great power, one has greater responsibilities. It's time for China to realize that truth and try to address this issue. As a global citizens, we expect this from the Chinese state. And thank you so much, our audience and our honorable guest, for coming here and speaking out. I would like to say goodbye to you from British Bangla News. Have a nice evening.